We want to go to our second panel this morning, and it's important to get a sense of what the general issues are. I thought our first panel did a great job, and Michelle was wonderful in clarifying some issues for us. We now want to kind of get on the ground and talk about how things happen at IVC, how they should happen, and what our resources are on campus. I've been here 10 years, and I'm afraid that if quizzed, I wouldn't be able to tell you about all of our resources. And as we meet with our students and look for help that they can have on campus, this is extremely important. So I want to introduce our panel in alphabetical order. First, Liz Cyprus, our Dean of Student Discipline at Irvine Valley College. Linda Fontanella, our Vice President for Student Services. She is also our Title IX Coordinator. Debbie Hutchinson, who is a mental health provider at our Health and Wellness Center. Also Stacy Levino, also a mental health provider here at our Health and Wellness Center. Back because he loves panels so much, John Meyer, our Chief of Campus Police, as we take him away from important things. Also joining us for our second panel, Pilar Morin, again, our counsel for District Council. And also the mysterious Keith Shackelford, who is a dean here, from what I understand, and also a BIT team member. He will tell us what the BIT team is during the course of our panel. We'll proceed through much the same we did with our first panel. We have questions, again, that were solicited from our staff, our management, our administration, our faculty. By the way, thank you for all of those. We received over 60 questions, and we had to work to kind of narrow them down a bit and combine some. So our first question is for our legal counsel, Pilar. How do we balance students' rights and employees' rights when it comes to student misconduct, especially when faculty and staff feel that their safety is at issue, both in their classrooms and in their offices?
Thank you. I want to follow up on some of the comments from this morning. So it's not uncommon for my office to get a call about a faculty member or another student in the classroom feeling threatened by another student. And so the first thing that we look at is what is causing them to feel threatened. Sometimes it could be speech, or conduct, and so it's important to look at the circumstances. This morning we talked quite extensively, the panelists did, about the right to speech, and that's very important. There sometimes is speech that takes place in the classroom that is protected speech, even if it is, as was mentioned this morning, hate speech. So that's something that's very important, is to look at the context. Are we talking about a debate that's taking place in a classroom, for example, a poli-sci classroom, and it's part of the classroom? The faculty member has a right to academic freedom, but so do students. And so that's an important thing to keep in mind, is that we have speech rights. The other thing that needs to take place, and generally takes place unless it's an urgent or a situation where there's going to be immediate harm, generally when we have a report of misconduct, is that there's an investigation. And by investigation, I mean a fact gathering, because we need to know what occurred. And so to do that, one of the things that we need to keep in mind, again, is the right to privacy. In California, we have a constitutional right to privacy. It's actually in our Constitution, unlike the United States Constitution, where the right to privacy is implied. And so when we're talking about a constitutional right to privacy, some of the things that we need to keep in mind is, do we have a right to go into the areas for an investigation. If someone says something is taking place on social media, we need to see, is it taking place in a place where we can enter and do an investigation, such as an open social media account, because we don't have a right to go into a social media account that's closed. So usually in that case, we would ask the student to bring us a screenshot or another printout that they have access to, because the investigator would not have access to that. And so once we have gathered all the information and have determined that there has been a violation, it's very important for the district to actually tie it in to a violation of the student code of conduct. And that is set forth in your administrative regulation 5401, because another right that students and employees have is to have notice of what the rules are. And students have those, again, in the administrative regulation, just like employees have it either through collective bargaining agreements, board agreements, or in the education code. And so we need to have a nexus between the conduct at issue and a violation of the rules. Students also have due process rights. And so one of the, again, unless it's an exigent situation, one of the things to keep in mind is that we need to give the student due process, just like we give our employees. So whenever there's going to be a deprivation of property, a property interest, such as a right to attend class, the right to continue with the education through a suspension or an expulsion, under the education code, that student is going to have a right to notice, which is a letter that states all the different charges and the facts that support the proposed discipline, and an opportunity to respond. The student's right to privacy also includes a right to privacy in front of the board. So just like employees have a right to privacy, employee discipline is agendized in closed session. Students also have that a topic agendized in closed session. And they have a right to ask for an open session, but it's up to them if they want to ask for an open session and give up that right to have that closed session, so that the board can consider whether or not they're going to be, for example, expelled in closed session. Once if the board decides that they are going to be expelled, then they would report it out once it becomes final. But again, protecting the student's privacy, the student's name, or if it's an employee under termination, is not revealed to the public. It's usually a number that is reported out of closed session. In terms of due process, the student has a right to an evidentiary hearing under the education code. That means that employees need to know that if they are complaining about a student, that they will most likely be called as witnesses to that hearing, so that they can testify against the student about what it is that occurred that would justify the student's discipline. And even once this whole process is completed and the student is, for example, expelled, again, that is private. Only those with a need to know are usually informed. But the transcripts of the student and those disciplinary records remain private, which is why generally, for example, if someone is suspended at another college and they come to this college, we would generally not have that information. There's very limited circumstances in which that kind of information is provided from college to college. For example, when there's an expulsion and it might involve, for example, something triggering Title IX, like a sex assault. Under Title IX, the victim is allowed to know the results of the discipline. So the rights of the individual that is being charged, the respondent, there are many rights to be protected and that we need to comply with, similar to that of the complainant. But that's something that I want to let you know so that you keep in mind that the disciplinary process does take a long time because of the evidentiary hearing that takes place. I also wanted to mention another tool that is available to the district. It's not uncommon for districts when there is an imminent risk of harm to seek a temporary restraining order under the Workplace Violence Safety Act. And to be able to get a temporary restraining order, we must have evidence or be able to articulate in a declaration unlawful violence or a credible threat of violence. And a judge would have to find that it's reasonably construed that the individual that we're seeking to restrain can carry out the violence or has actually carried it out in the workplace. Once a temporary restraining order is issued, within 2 weeks, we have to go back and actually put on a trial. So we would call those individuals that we're seeking to protect. If it's a faculty member, that faculty member would have to go to the Superior Court. We would, all of these documents have to be served on the respondent, the person that we're seeking to be restrained. And that respondent has a right to confront the individuals, the witnesses in court. So that's something else to keep in mind. And those that we seek to protect would testify in court. And at that point of the injunctive relief, the court would be looking to see if we can show clear and convincing evidence that the employee engaged in violence or threat of violence. If we're able to prove that, then a judge would issue a 3-year injunction against the individual. As part of that, if that individual owns any type of arm, a gun or anything like that, they would have to give the gun up as part of that order, and it can be renewed after the 3 years. And that is one situation in which we are allowed to distribute the photo of an individual, because once a judge has found that a restraining order should be issued to protect the workplace, such as a college, then we would disseminate the photo so that if that person comes on campus in violation of the order, police and others are aware of who is being restrained.
Thank you. For our next, we have 2 questions actually for Debbie Hutchinson and Stacy Levino. And they have to do with 2 areas. First, determining whether a student is in psychological distress, and if they are, what services do we have available on campus? And then secondly, what are the best practices for dealing with aggressive, defiant, threatening student behavior in the classroom itself? Debbie and Stacy have a PowerPoint that they would like to share with us, and I'd like to invite them up to the podium, please.
Thank you. Okay, so this PowerPoint and also the handouts that we're going to go over briefly, it's on the table outside, so if you guys haven't got them, just make sure they're very important. So with part of the question, how do I determine if a student is in psychological distress? There is a student crisis guide, so this blue folder here outside. It talks about different indicators, so I'm just going to go over a few here. Academic indicators. So if you notice a student who's normally an A student, they're starting to fail, their grades are declining, repeated absences, they're not showing up and they tend to always show up. Stuff like that, that's the academic part. Those are gonna be red flags. Physical indicators, you see their appearance is changing, maybe they look disheveled, something is different and you realize this isn't the way the student normally is. So that's gonna be more of a physical indicator, maybe intoxicated, falling asleep a lot, things like that. Safety risk indicators, anger, hostility, threats, and they may not normally be doing that. So all of these are going to be out of the normal that you normally have for your students. And then psychological indicators, and I know we have a lot of staff and faculty that bring students down, that they're crying, they're tearful, maybe they're writing in papers, a lot of very emotional experiences. So if they come to you, that's a psychological indicator. So those are the indicators that they need help. And if you're noticing 1, 2, 2, 3, all of them, it doesn't matter, even if just one. The second part of the question is, what can you do? And it's bringing them to the Health and Wellness Center. So bringing them down, I'm gonna say you wanna bring them down because when you say, okay, go to the Health and Wellness Center, they're not always gonna come. A lot of times they don't. They trust you. They're talking to you. So if you just walk them down, we call it a soft handoff. If we're up there, we can meet them, make an appointment. You know, we want them to feel comfortable. It can be kind of scary for them to come down. So we just want to make sure that, you know, you walk them down if you're able to do that. So that way we can help them. So we have resources that we give to students, and it's not just we give these to students say, okay, this is all that we do. You know, we have a lot of contacts on these resources, and there's 2 of them, the front and the back, and it's this purple sheet. They're free. There's some free low-cost places they can go for more counseling if they need more than we can give them. They need to see a psychiatrist. They need medication. These are resources we worked with for years. They're amazing. We've had a lot of, you know, when we have our resources on campus, this is really good. So this is something we can help them with. You guys will have this in your packet. So if they don't want to see us, this is a resource, but it's really good for us to be able to talk to the students to be able to do that. And also, just to talk about some statistics from from the 2017 to 2018, we have over 400 students dealing with anxiety, over 300 dealing with depression. You can see all the stats, and that's just dealing with one school year. We have a pre-test for depression, and at this point, we just did it for this past fall, and out of 1,000 students, we had a little over 200 with severe depression. So this just shows how important it is to make sure if you see any of these indicators to come down, bring them down. If you're not sure, you don't know, please call myself, call Debbie, email us. If you have questions, a lot of staff and faculty have been amazing coming down, talking to us. That's what we're here for. You know, just make sure we're here to help you and we're here to help the students. Thank you.
Okay, and in regards to how do we handle an aggressive student, unfortunately, that does sometimes occur. I'm pleased to say that it's not happening a lot, but it can happen on our campus as well as any campus. The good news is we have an incredible police team here on campus, and so that's always step number 1. If something does occur, immediately we call our campus police department. Now, what do we do while we're waiting for the police to arrive? And as we heard earlier from the first panel, they get here pretty quickly if we need them for any reason. But there are specific things that we can do to help manage a potentially aggressive situation. The first thing that we want to do is to listen in a manner that we're not being judgmental, the person doesn't feel criticized, because these are tools for de-escalating a situation. If someone is feeling criticized, boom, their aggressiveness goes up. We also want to make sure that we look at ourselves. And the way that we do that is by, let me look at my body language. Is my body language getting, I'm showing my nervousness, I'm throwing my arms up. Instead, we want to present in a calm way. No matter what you're feeling in the moment, you want to present in a very calm way. Monitor your tone of voice, monitor your volume of your voice, because often what can happen is someone who's becoming aggressive, the voice begins to go up, it gets louder. We have to make sure that we drop ours in order to keep it low. One of the biggest tools I can share with you, having worked in the hospital setting for many years, when I've had to de-escalate people, is to, as hard as it may be in the moment, try to see the person instead of the disorder. And talk to the person. Show your compassion. Show that you're wanting to encourage them and you're wanting to assist them. And that is one of the tools that I've seen as being the very most effective in de-escalating people. There are times, obviously, in the classroom setting where you're going to have to set limits. It's appropriate to do so, but you do it with an explanation as far as why you're doing so. And the key is, as we're talking about here today, it's all about safety. And if you've heard the theme throughout this morning's panel and what we're talking about now, it's really about being prepared. It is preparation. Referring to the Student Crisis Guide, Stacy also talked about it. we have here for you, this was developed based on feedback that we got from professors as far as what the need is. So you may have, oh my gosh, is this person in my classroom of danger to himself or herself? We have columns here. If your answer is yes, it tells you specifically what to do. If you're not sure, it tells you specifically what to do. If the answer is no, it tells you specifically what to do. So please read over this resource. The key truly is preparation. As we've talked about depression, and at the center, we've been tracking the depression to see what our students are coming in with. Research is showing now that anxiety is exceeding depression, but they're pretty much close to each other. But within the population that we're working with here in the college setting, it's between the ages of 18 to 25 that depression is most prevalent. So be aware of that. We're going to see that a lot in our classrooms. And the bottom bullet that I have up there that I thought was very important for all of us to be aware of is the rate of violence is comparable to the population that doesn't have any mental health disorders. So we often feel that if someone is in our classroom or someone presents and they're struggling with a mental health disorder, we're going to be guaranteed it's going to be a problem of violence, but not necessarily. So it's comparable to the general population. It is worth it to mention a couple of specific mental health disorders that are presenting in the classroom, just so you know maybe what you're seeing, not to make a diagnosis, but to be familiar with it. Schizophrenia is one of them. So what can schizophrenia look like in your classroom? Well, you may have someone that comes in and it's difficult for them to make eye contact with you. They do what we call a flat affect, meaning no expression on their face. Maybe their attire, they're presenting in a way that's very disheveled. That can be a clue. With schizophrenia, you're going to have individuals who are hearing voices and seeing things that are not there. When you're in that classroom and that's occurring, that can be very frightening. Again, rely on, let me talk to the person here, not so much the disorder. But we want to be very aware of that. If someone does present with schizophrenia and they're having aggressive behavior, we're going to follow the same procedures. You have your resources here. The police department will respond rapidly, and we at the Mental Health and Wellness Center are willing to come and support in any way that we can. So think of us as your two main resources. Common sense is also going to kick in once you're working with people if something like that does come up. If you're feeling threatened in any way, make sure that you do have safe personal space. If you need to be a little closer to the door so that you need to walk out, if you're meeting one-on-one with a person after class, for example, use that type of common sense because all of those things do come into play. It's important to know too that we cannot talk a person out of a hallucination. So if someone is talking to you and maybe they're seeing someone that's not there, you can't talk them out of it, so don't even try. But just reassure them and encourage them that we're all here and we're here to help and support. The other one that I wanted to mention to you was bipolar disorder. It used to be called manic depression. It's now bipolar, and we have two different classifications of bipolar. We have bipolar 1 and bipolar 2. Bipolar 1 is your typical manic depression. Bipolar 2, you've never had a mania episode. One thing that's very important to know about bipolar disorder is the suicidal risk is 15 times that of the general population. So what that says is within your classroom setting, if you're concerned with someone who's acting out, it could be even toward themselves. So while we're putting forth effort to make sure that our classroom students are safe, we're safe, we want to make sure that the individual who maybe is showing some disruptive behavior is safe too. What you'll see with mania is more of the grandiosity. You might have a student who will say to you, well, you know what, I'm going to go home tonight and I thank you for the syllabus and I'm going to do all the assignments tonight and turn them in to you tomorrow. And not likely to happen, but that's kind of how grandiosity might appear. They may be speaking very rapidly and you'll see a change in behavior where they may have gone from a depressed state to a manic state. And that's a clue to you that there's something going on. So with bipolar disorder, if that happens to present, or maybe one of the students is sharing that with you, that they've been diagnosed with bipolar disorder, think your resources. We call our police department, contact us at the wellness center. We're glad to help, and anything that works. I often will say to people, if I see them getting aggressive and they're standing up, I invite them to sit down. Never force them, but I invite them because that helps them to calm down. And sometimes if you just say to a person, let's pause for a minute, let's breathe, they will cooperate, and that can de-escalate the situation as well. All of these points I'm going over are in your packet, but I just wanted to hit on the key ones with you. We want you to know that we are here to support you. We currently have been providing the trainings that are listed on the PowerPoint, but if you have any other trainings or ideas or needs that you have, please call us, let us know. We're more than happy to develop a presentation around your needs. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think that's an excellent topic for a follow-up. So perhaps during this semester, we could invite Stacy and Debbie to a presentation for faculty and staff. Our next question, a bit related, is for Linda Fontanella and Liz Cyprus. When are a student's actions or behaviors serious enough to have him or her removed from the classroom or even from the campus?
Thank you, Dan. Good morning, everyone. So nice to see you. Welcome to the spring semester. Before I respond to the question, a couple of things I want to say is I want to thank the deans and the managers and our talented classified staff who helped put all of the resources together for you today. Stephanie Alvarez in particular, and Maria Nunez spent a good part of their weekend helping us to put these resources out to make sure you get them. So I wanted to acknowledge them. We take our work about student discipline very serious because we know it can have serious consequences, not only for those of us who work at the college, but for students who are trying to obtain their education. And so when we're thinking in terms of, we're in a situation now that we're going to go down the discipline track, we have to keep in mind several pieces of information, and it's not always easy. Anytime we're looking at a student discipline situation, we're thinking about how California Ed Code, how the California Penal Code, how our FERPA laws, and also our district board policies are guiding us to handle the situations that we are facing. In particular, there are about 11 California Ed codes, 2 or 3 penal codes that always come to mind, and of course, 4 board policies in particular. I feel so strongly that you have the board policies available for you. I had them bound them and put them in a packet for you so you can review those. When a faculty member feels that a student's behavior is preventing teaching and learning from occurring in the class time, it's time for you to use your professional judgment, but in most cases, to ask the student to leave. Our board policy 5401 or administrative regulation 5401 describes a disruption in the classroom as willful disobedience, habitual profanity or vulgarity, or the open and persistent defiance of authority of district personnel. And of course, you or the authorities and the district personnel in the classroom who are managing your classroom. And if you have a student who is getting out of hand and you believe that student is not taking heed to what you are asking them, then it's time to ask them to leave. Of course, California Education Code 76032 gives you the authority to ask the student to leave and not return to classroom for that particular day and the next class. And while you are operating under the California Ed Code of 76032, when we find out about this student, we're operating on the Ed Code of 76031, which gives us the authority, the president of the authority, or his designee at the college, the the right to look at what sort of sanction, if necessary, that we are going to impose on a student. And of course, the president or the designee has the authority to ask the student to leave up to 10 days of instruction. And in the meantime, we are dealing with how we're going to handle the student. If the behavior of a student is such that the faculty feels that the student, as Debbie and Stacy have said, is becoming a threat, I would advise you immediately to go over and pick up the phone. You have a button on your phone now that you don't have to look for. It gets you directly to our IVC police department. Use that without hesitation. If for some reason you can't get to the phone or you're being prevented from getting to your phone, turn to someone in the classroom and ask them to go for help. But when you dismiss a student from the classroom, as soon as possible, we would like for you to use our advocate system to report that you've asked the student to leave. The advocate system is being placed on your desktops now, and we've been working with the district IT department to make sure that everyone is going to have quick availability to advocate. If you go into advocate, you are going to pull up the discipline form, and you're going to follow the prompts to tell us what violation the student has made in reference to our board policy 5401, and then describe what actually happens. Once that incident or report discipline form is into the advocate system, whether you indicate it's a formal request or an informal request to deal with the issue that has occurred in the classroom, it's going to be directed to Dr. Cyprus' office. And when she and her administrative assistant receives that notification, then Liz will go through a process of calling the student in, and I'll allow her to describe that now.
Your report and advocate is very important, because when you dismiss a student from your classroom, they're running over to my office, and a few times they've been there before I got the report, so I have to delay their meeting. I get an automatic notification on my email system as soon as your report is submitted. My administrative assistant, Gracelia Montour, will schedule the hearing with them, and they'll come in. On this form here, student conduct, these are the different violations on the front, so I go over their violation, I listen to their side of the story, because it's often different than yours, no surprise. What is helpful for me is if you specify the behavior conduct that you expect in your syllabus. Oftentimes you'll attach documentation. For example, not using the cell phone during your test. You know, they'll say, well, I had my cell phone, I was just laying it on my lap and I got an emergency call. Said, it specifically said that you're not allowed to use electronic devices or your cell phone. So you violated that, you were informed of that, it's specifically stated on your syllabus. So it helps me explain to the student their violation and the consequences. Again, the discipline hearing is a confidential process, but what I do with the student, I read to them their violation, I listen to them for their side of the story, and then they'll get a verbal reprimand, they'll get a written reprimand that is specifically for them, stating the violation and the consequences of that. There's an electronic record kept on the advocate system, so I know if it's a repeated violation. I will also know, say, you, plagiarism, that's one I get a lot. You may have given the student a 0 on the test or whatever they were taking and considered that sufficient, and it didn't, so you said it was informal. Then they did it again, so then you wanted a formal. So I'll let them know, they'll go, oh, this is my first time. I go, no, it's not. They talked to you on this date, and now this is formal because you did it again in the same class. And it's like, oh, so it really does help me, the documentation, explain the process to the student, and defend the decision and the action so that they get placed on discipline probation. If it's repeated offense and all our corrective measures have not been successful, I will recommend suspension or expulsion. Those of you that have participated in a panel, I thank you. You know it's a long process. The documentation is pretty thick that we go through, and listening to the witnesses and both sides of the story to make a decision. I usually don't go forward with that unless I'm pretty confident we have a very strong case of the student. So I'm here to assist you in classroom management, and I will work with you throughout the process, and there's prompt action taken as soon as that advocate report is in.
So we're talking about two profiles of a student here. One that Liz just described is a student who gets in trouble and needs to leave the class, but he eventually is allowed by you and in collaborating with the discipline officer to come back to class and move forward in obtaining their education. But as she said, there are situations where if it's repeated offenses or the offenses are egregious enough that we decide that we're going to make a recommendation for a suspension or for an expulsion, then we have to follow Board Policy 5401 as mentioned by legal counsel and follow the process that is set forth in having a hearing so that we give the students their due process in being able to defend themselves, because when it's an suspension or expulsion, they're going to miss time away from class. Whether it's a couple of weeks, that is certainly going to put them behind, or a semester or multiple semesters, then we're looking at them having to develop a whole new plan for their exit here at IVC. Again, a suspension or an expulsion is so serious that if we are talking in these terms, we are picking up the phone and we are contacting our Vice Chancellor of Human Resources. We are being advised to contact our legal counsel and have conversations about what the actual situation is here that we are handling. And for those of you, again, who have been on these hearing panels, you know it's more than just a notion to go through this. In the month of November and December of 2018, so just recently, we had 3 expulsions from this college. Again, expelling a student from the college means that they cannot come back to Irvine Valley College, Saddleback, or in this case, ATEP. They are expelled from attending any of the sites in our district. So this student is looking at, you know, having maybe to move outside of the district or travel now to obtain their education in another institution. So expulsion is very serious, and as indicated earlier, only the Board of Trustees have the authority to expel a student. We make the recommendation to the president makes the recommendation to the chancellor, and the chancellor's conversation with Board of Trustees. And this goes to a process through the Board of Trustees in which they can have a closed hearing and discussion or open hearing about this depending on what the student is requesting. But a very, very serious step to take. We do not hesitate to make that recommendation, but we make it knowing that there is a very serious consequences in mind for that student because he or she will not be coming back to our college. But as I said, you know, just in the last 2 months, we've had 3 expulsions, and it's rare for us to do that, but we are looking at your safety, the student's safety, the entire campus community safety, and when we make that recommendation, we decide that this individual is not fit to be here. They need to either have some other resources before they can come back and be resourceful, or this is not a person who needs to be on our campus at this time.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Fontanilla and Dean Cyprus. Next question for Chief Meyer. What are the current practices and future plans for physically securing our classrooms?
Well, currently, as you are all probably aware, over at our ATEP IDEA building in Tustin, we have access control systems in place for all doors and camera system. It's a very robust camera system, and also a lockdown function that is in place on all of the door locks. Well, we've had some challenges with the lockdown function, and we're looking at changing that to a lockdown button in each classroom. And there's also a comprehensive construction project being planned out for this campus, which would include access control at all interior and exterior doors, both wired and non-wired, and also lockdown buttons as well. And that these systems will give our dispatchers the ability to initiate a lockdown and also resolve a lockdown that was not needed as well. But it brings me back to earlier comments from the last session, and that is basically, you have a couple of minutes that you are responsible for in an emergency when there's a lockdown or there's some sort of a need to secure your classroom. And that's where you need to have a plan. I mean, currently we have on this campus our traditional locks, and then we have our night lock system, which is temporary. And you may or may not be familiar with that. Hopefully you are, depending upon whether the door opens inward or outward. Most classroom doors have a device that's mounted on the wall near the door that will either hold the door in place on the door jamb or will go into the floor depending upon which way the door opens. And that will help secure the door in a lockdown situation. Although I stress these are temporary measures and they're not designed to be the answer to the future. I mean, access control is the best way to go as far as being able to secure classrooms in any emergency situation, and that is the direction we're going. But it is incumbent upon all of you to have a plan to be able to, if necessary, use your ingenuity to get a door locked, to barricade using desks, whatever the case is. And part of securing, not in the traditional definition of securing, but is to make your classroom or your office space, your work area, look unoccupied. I mean, this is what's going to buy you critical moments when you're faced with an emergency situation, depending upon whatever that is. That would include turning off the lights, keeping your noise to a minimum, drawing the blinds, covering the windows, making it look like to whoever may be outside that there's nobody in here worth going in for. There's no targets, so to speak, in this building or in this room. And this is what we have been stressing as a police department, going from building to building and department to department, speaking about lockdown situations and trying to prepare and equip everyone with the knowledge and an idea to formulate your own plan of what you're going to do in your own workspace, in your own classroom. So it all does go back to preparation. And but we look to the future to be able to implement these new systems of access control and cameras that will definitely enhance our safety on campus in those situations.
Thank you. In our earlier panel this morning, we discussed a little ways in which agencies in the county and the state and even nationally coordinate in situations regarding campus safety. A question that repeatedly came up had to do with coordination on campus as well. So this is for Dean Shackelford. How do campus police and other campus departments coordinate in order to enhance campus safety?
Thank you. I'm glad to be here in my role as Mysterioso. In jest, I need to acknowledge something up front. I am an old, white, heterosexual father of two. I am the least threatened and the least protected human on the entire campus. It means that I have to be keenly aware and self-assess consistently how I operate and the things that we do in our area as its leader, because I don't share the same kind of perspective that those who work with me do. It means I need to be aware of those circumstances that may be different for them when they feel unsafe and the rest. It's why I'm on a lot of different committees, because I have a lot to learn. It's why I'm on the BIT team. I am the least qualified person on the BIT team, and I contribute by far the least amount of content to those discussions. Everyone on there is a specialist and an expert in some area as it relates to the behavioral intervention team, and I ask a lot of questions. That part is very gratifying in the fact that they indulge me in the questions I have to ask, because I learn every single time I attend. I don't contribute much, but what I bring from it is incredibly valuable to me as a leader, and is incredibly valuable, I think, to our team when I get back to our department meetings. Thanks to Liz and her membership on both the behavioral intervention team and as a member of our Dean's Council, that information then comes back to all the deans. The information that's taken there in that sense of cooperation and communication, that sense of collegiality, sharing of information and tactics, becomes very useful information to the rest of the deans who, like me, don't necessarily indulge in those kinds of topics on a day-to-day basis. So when Liz brings it as part of a standing agenda item to our Dean's Council, it means that information starts to filter its way to the rest of the campus. Again, with Liz and with Linda on the team, it means that student services get that information once that information is dispersed through the BIT team. And with Chief and with Detective Romero on that team, it means that those informations get through DeVite's area, meaning Operations and Business Services. And so the team itself is incredibly valuable as a learning tool for me, but it's also incredibly valuable as an informational tool for the rest of the campus. That BIT template is something that we then try in the School of Kinesiology, Health, and Athletics to use as a template for our own operations. I try to think of other things we do and answer directly to Dan's question in terms of what do we do to coordinate campus safety. We have regular meetings with Detective Romero through our equipment attendant because we have to deal with things like the team rooms and the locker rooms, the new homeless law, access to students who may not have a home and things of that nature. It means we have department speakers every single time we meet as a school or as a department from all over the campus. It means the proactive ability for us to build relationships with someone on a first name basis. So if and when something does come up, we have someone we can refer to almost immediately. We have me on the BIT team. We have a member on the Campus Safety Task Force. We try to do the best we can in terms of dealing with risk management at the district level on a regular basis because our facility is so big. We regularly have those kind of conversations with them and disperse that information to other areas, especially with Chief and Detective Romero. We try to do as best we can training. And we have a new commitment from our Vice Chancellor of Human Resources, Cindy Viscachill, that training will become more and more available and more accessible as she gets further into her tenure in the Vice Chancellor's office. We did use the slides from the mandatory reporter that the DAM meeting had 3 years ago. We did use the slides from sexual harassment and Title IX harassment from Dr. Viscachill last semester. We have regular conversations about HIPAA and FERPA in our area, because FERPA is college-wide, but HIPAA, something Nancy Montgomery probably well knows, also relates to the health issues as well. And because of our sports medicine staff, we have to contend with those issues as well. It means that BIT as a template, but then so much more beyond that, our own efforts to be proactive in the School of Kinesiology, Health, and Athletics means that we try to be transparent, we try to communicate as effectively and routinely and regularly as possible, that we dispense that information to all of our people as regularly as possible, and that we have an opportunity to share tactics and information with those who might be valuable to us as well. We then take all of that, we create our own operations manuals on an annual basis. We then go back at the end of every academic year to those that are specialists in those areas and ask them, hey, do we still have it right? Have things changed? It can be as innocuous as checking out a van. It could be as serious as how are we managing disabled students, especially in times of crisis. But that regular and routine conversation among people on a first name basis means that relationships carry the day for us. And so if there's something I can say that's directly answering this question is that we work at it. And my assumption is, based on what I know about the deans in the Office of Instruction in those areas, we all do. My assumption is that those areas in student services and those areas in business services do the same thing. We may not have always been as good as we would want to, but I think we're clearly moving in the right direction. If you'll indulge me for 60 seconds, Ms. Deutschman heartily encouraged my recommendation of this book from the first part of our speech today. This was written by Irvine Chemerinsky, who you all remember was our keynote 2 or 3 years ago, and was the dean at UCI Law. He's now the dean of Cal Law. He co-wrote this with the chancellor at UC Irvine, Howard Gilman, who was our commencement speaker, I think like a year and a half ago. And it talks about all the things Ms. Deutschman talked about today, but in much greater detail. For those of you who are also maybe history buffs, there's also an extended level of history as it relates to free speech on campus. If I can summarize this in one thing, the answer to hate speech is not less speech, the answer to hate speech is more speech. Only by exposing idiotic ideas to the free exchange and the free marketplace of ideas do we expose them for what they are. And so we as warriors in this regard, I can't recommend that more highly. It's really quick, it's only 150 pages. I read it in Free Speech on Campus by Irvine Chemerinsky and Howard Gilman. I read it in 2 wrestling practices for my little guy. It took me 3 hours.
Thank you, Keith. Thanks especially for your comment that your sense of safety, my sense of safety is often very different from how safe or unsafe our students are feeling. That's extremely important. Because you're a mysterious person, I have just a quick follow-up for you. One of the most mysterious things to me at IVC is our repeated use of acronyms. I believe we have about 230 that we use on a daily basis to describe committees. I know you mentioned it briefly. Could you tell us what BIT stands for and perhaps what departments might be represented on BIT?
Sure, the Behavioral Intervention Team. It's pretty standard on college campuses, but was fairly new to us maybe 2.5 years ago now? 4 years ago now. IVC PD, Nancy Montgomery through the Health Center, Liz through counseling, Linda through the Office of Student Services, Facilities, IT, DSPS. I'm missing somebody. I got police in there too, though. And so Sandy from the president's office. And so the team itself considers all kinds of things. It's fairly broad. The initial assumption is that we're only talking about those students that are potentially most problematic, but we talk about things like Stacy is talking about, very specific about managing our classrooms and managing students that are not problems, but are suffering, and we may be able to assist them. It's been rewarding to be a part of because I didn't know anything on the way in, and I know much more now.
Thank you. We're running fairly close to our end time, so I wanted to remind everyone of the incredible resources that have been provided outside. Please pick those up. If you don't pick them up, I'll threaten to put them in your mailbox, so you'll get them one way or the other. Thanks to our panel for taking their time this morning. If we could give them a round of applause. And I'd like to invite President Rockmore to come forward for some closing remarks.
And a round of applause for Dan DeRelay. I think he did a fantastic job. Thank you very much. I too thank the panel, both panels that we've had today. Again, to remind everybody, this is just the beginning. This is to really, I think as Dan said, is to remind us of those questions that we could have asked if we had this ahead of time. Excuse me. So think of those questions because we will, throughout this semester, perhaps even longer, through our committees or different associations, have various panel members join us for a more intimate exploration of all of these topics. And so think about that, think about how we can incorporate them and help move this college forward in a safe and healthy manner. So again, thank you very much. Have a great semester, and lunch is served.